Hello, I'm SA, your AI essayist. Please note that all content, audio and video in this presentation are AI generated. As AI can sometimes produce inaccuracies, I encourage you to verify any factual information presented. With that in mind, let's begin.
Margaret Masterman stands as a pivotal figure in 20th century intellectual history, a scholar whose impact resonates across the philosophy of science and computational linguistics. Her incisive mind, trained in the rigorous tradition of Wittgensteinian analysis, brought a much-needed clarity to complex conceptual landscapes. Masterman is perhaps best known for her penetrating deconstruction of Thomas Kuhn's concept of the paradigm, a term central to his groundbreaking work, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, Masterman did more than offer simple disagreement. She revealed a fundamental ambiguity that threatened the very foundation of Kuhn's model. In her seminal 1970 paper, aptly titled The Nature of a Paradigm, Masterman embarked on a meticulous examination of Kuhn's text. Her approach, innovative for its time, involved what could be described as a proto-corpus linguistic analysis. She painstakingly cataloged and categorized each instance of Kuhn's usage of the word paradigm, treating the text as a data set to be mined for patterns of meaning. This analytical rigor allowed her to expose the term's slippery and multifaceted nature, revealing that Kuhn employed paradigm in at least 21 distinct senses. This was no mere semantic quibble. It was a fundamental challenge to the coherence of Kuhn's entire thesis. Masterman's analysis distilled these various usages into three primary categories. First, she identified what she termed metaphysical paradigms. These were broad, overarching worldviews, such as the Newtonian mechanistic universe or the Einsteinian relativistic cosmos. These paradigms represented deeply ingrained assumptions about the fundamental nature of reality, shaping the very questions scientists deemed worth asking and the types of answers they considered plausible. Second, Masterman delineated sociological paradigms. These encompassed the shared commitments, values, and institutional structures of a scientific community. They included the accepted methodologies, the established journals, the professional societies, and the unspoken rules that govern scientific discourse. These sociological paradigms defined who was considered a legitimate member of the scientific community and what constituted acceptable scientific practice. Most significantly, Masterman highlighted artifact or construct paradigms. These were the concrete, exemplary puzzle solutions that served as models for future research. They were the textbook examples, the classic experiments, and the canonical derivations that students learned and imitated. A prime example is a specific application of Newton's laws to calculate the trajectory of a projectile or the motion of a planet. Masterman argued that this third, most concrete sense of paradigm was the most potent and the one Kuhn should have prioritized. These concrete examples, she believed, were the true drivers of scientific progress, providing tangible guidance for researchers grappling with new problems. The implications of Masterman's critique were profound. She demonstrated that the ambiguity of the term paradigm could lead to misunderstandings and misinterpretations of Kuhn's work. If paradigm could mean so many different things, how could it serve as a stable foundation for understanding scientific revolutions? How could one determine when a paradigm shift had occurred if the very definition of paradigm was so fluid? Masterman's intervention forced a reevaluation of Kuhn's framework, prompting him to address the ambiguity and refine his terminology. Masterman's work continues to hold immense relevance in contemporary meta-science and the philosophy of science. It is mandatory reading for anyone seeking a deep understanding of Kuhn's structure of scientific revolutions. Her analytical method, though predating the rise of digital humanities, foreshadows techniques now commonplace in the analysis of philosophical texts. Scholars now employ sophisticated computational tools to analyze large corpora philosophical writing, identifying patterns of usage and uncovering hidden assumptions. Masterman's painstaking manual analysis anticipated this trend, demonstrating the power of close textual scrutiny in illuminating conceptual complexities. Her intellectual debt to Ludwig Wittgenstein is unmistakable. Masterman studied with Wittgenstein at Cambridge, absorbing his emphasis on the importance of understanding meaning through use. Wittgenstein's concept of language games, the idea that words derive their meaning from the specific contexts in which they are used, is clearly reflected in Masterman's approach to Kuhn's paradigm. She sought to understand the meaning of the term by examining its various uses within Kuhn's text, rather than imposing a single, abstract definition. Similarly, Wittgenstein's notion of family resemblance, the idea that concepts can be related to one another through a network of overlapping similarities rather than a set of shared essential features, informs Masterman's categorization of the different senses of paradigm. The impact of Masterman's critique on Thomas Kuhn himself was direct and undeniable. In the 1970 postscript to Structure of Scientific Revolutions, Kuhn explicitly addressed the ambiguity of the term paradigm and acknowledged the validity of Masterman's concerns. He proposed the terms disciplinary matrix and exemplar to differentiate the various senses that Masterman had identified. Disciplinary matrix encompassed the shared beliefs, values, and techniques of a scientific community, while exemplar referred to the concrete problem-solving models that Masterman had highlighted. This terminological refinement was a direct response to Masterman's critique, demonstrating her profound influence on the evolution of Kuhn's own theory. Kuhn's adoption of exemplar as a key term signaled a shift in emphasis toward the concrete, practical aspects of scientific knowledge, aligning with Masterman's emphasis on artifact paradigms. Masterman's work serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of conceptual clarity in scientific and philosophical discourse. Her meticulous analysis of Kuhn's paradigm exposed the dangers of ambiguity and the need for precise terminology. Her legacy extends beyond the specific case of Kuhn's work, offering a valuable lesson for anyone engaged in the construction and interpretation of complex concepts. Her contribution was not merely critical, it was constructive, forcing a deeper understanding of how scientific knowledge is created, communicated, and transformed. Margaret Masterman's intellectual journey, marked by a relentless pursuit of clarity and precision, extended beyond the critique of Thomas Kuhn's paradigm concept. Her profound impact on the nascent field of computational linguistics, particularly machine translation, reveals a similar dedication to rigorous problem-solving and a visionary capacity to anticipate future directions in artificial intelligence. This commitment is vividly illustrated by her founding and leadership of the Cambridge Language Research Unit CLRU, a pivotal institution in the development of early computational linguistics. The 1950s witnessed the initial, somewhat naive, attempts at machine translation. Early systems relied on simplistic word-for-word substitution, a strategy that proved spectacularly inadequate. The resulting translations were often grammatically flawed and semantically nonsensical. The court challenge, a significant hurdle that hampered progress, was the elusive nature of semantic representation within a computational framework. How could the nuanced meaning inherent in human language be captured and processed by a machine? This question formed the bedrock of Masterman's work at the CLRU. Masterman and her colleagues at the CLRU decisively rejected the purely syntactic approaches prevalent at the time. They recognized the limitations of focusing solely on grammatical structure, divorced from the underlying meaning of words and sentences. Instead, they championed a revolutionary approach centered on the creation of an interlingua, a language-independent semantic representation. This interlingua was not a new human language, but rather a system for representing meaning in a computationally tractable manner. The CLRU ingenious solution involved a carefully selected set of conceptual primitives, a limited vocabulary of fundamental semantic units, ranging from approximately 100 to 500 terms, derived from the organizational structure of a thesaurus, akin to Roget's thesaurus. This approach was fundamentally different from the prevailing methods. It involved a multifaceted process. First, a source text would be meticulously analyzed and deconstructed into this reduced semantic form, a kind of nude representation stripped of its surface grammatical structure. The resulting semantic representation, expressed in terms of these fundamental concepts, would then serve as an intermediary, language-neutral stage. From this intermediate representation, the generation of a target language text could proceed, guided by the semantic content rather than the superficial grammatical form. The CLRU work was not merely theoretical speculation. It involved the development of practical algorithms and their implementation on the computational technology of the era punch card machines. These algorithms were designed to test the feasibility and effectiveness of the thesaurus-based semantic model. The researchers employed lattice theory, a branch of mathematics concerned with partially ordered sets, to map the complex relationships between concepts within the interlingua. This resulted in the creation of a multidimensional semantic space, a rich representation of meaning that captured the subtle nuances and interconnections between concepts. It is crucial to emphasize that the CLRU research was characterized by a focus on small-scale, deeply theoretical experiments, prioritizing a profound understanding of the nature of meaning over the construction of large-scale, commercially viable machine translation systems. While the CLRU-specific methods were eventually superseded by the statistical approaches that came to dominate machine translation, their fundamental contribution remains undeniable and profoundly influential. The CLRU's central goal, representing meaning in a structured, computable vector space, is a direct intellectual ancestor of many modern natural language processing NLP techniques. Word embeddings, such as word2vec and LoV, which represent words as vectors in a high-dimensional space, capture semantic relationships in a manner strikingly similar to the CLRU multidimensional semantic space. Similarly, the increasingly important field of knowledge graphs, which represent knowledge as interconnected nodes and edges, echoes the CLRU use of lattice theory to model conceptual relationships. The very debate that raged between symbolic, semantic AI and statistical AI in the 1950s and 60s, a debate in which the CLRU played a central role, continues to shape the field today. Masterman's leadership and vision profoundly influenced the careers of her colleagues. The intellectual climate of Cambridge, infused with the cybernetic ideas of Norbert Wiener and the information theory of Claude Shannon, provided a fertile ground for innovation. Furthermore, her husband, the philosopher of science R.B. Braithwaite, provided crucial intellectual support and rigor. However, the most significant legacy of the CLRU, and perhaps Masterman's most enduring contribution, is the profound influence she had on Karen Specq-Jones. Specq-Jones, who began her career at the CLRU, was deeply shaped by Masterman's emphasis on semantic representation. This foundational understanding of semantic importance would later inform her revolutionary invention of inverse document frequency, IDF, a cornerstone algorithm underlying nearly all modern search engines. This demonstrates the far-reaching impact of Masterman's work, extending well beyond the immediate context of the CLRU and its machine translation experiments. Her contributions laid a crucial foundation for many subsequent developments in the field, underscoring her status as a true pioneer in computational linguistics. Margaret Masterman's intellectual journey extended far beyond the practical challenges of machine translation. She grappled with a more profound question: how can a formal system, governed by literal rules, ever hope to process the figurative language that is so central to human cognition? This challenge loomed large for early symbolic artificial intelligence researchers. The capacity for metaphor, for nuanced interpretation, seemed intrinsically beyond the reach of a machine operating on binary logic. Masterman confronted this problem head-on. She proposed that metaphor was a fundamental cognitive mechanism woven into the very fabric of thought, rather than a mere stylistic flourish. The thesaurus-based semantic networks, developed at the Cambridge Language Research Unit, she believed, could provide a computational model for this mechanism. Her approach was innovative as she treated poetic language as a dataset, a rich source of evidence for revealing the underlying computational structure of metaphorical thought. To illustrate her ideas, she turned to the poetry of Gerard Manley Hopkins, a poet known for his dense, innovative use of language. In Hopkins' work, Masterman saw a concrete manifestation of metaphorical processes. She conceptualized metaphor as a hop across a semantic lattice. A poet, she argued, connects two seemingly disparate conceptual nodes within the thesaurus structure, creating a new, emergent meaning. A computer, properly programmed, could be designed to trace, or even generate, these metaphorical hops. Consider, for example, Hopkins' use of the word brout in a religious context. Masterman might analyze this by showing how brout is normally associated with concepts of animality, instinct, and lack of reason. However, Hopkins deploys it to describe a spiritual state, a raw, unrefined faith. This creates a metaphorical hop from the domain of animal behavior to the domain of religious experience. The CLRU thesaurus, by mapping the semantic connections of brout, could, in principle, represent this cognitive leap. Furthermore, Masterman analyzed poetic stress and meter as a computational device for chunking and prioritizing semantic information. The rhythmic structure of a poem, she argued, serves to highlight certain words and phrases, drawing attention to their semantic weight. This process of prioritization, she believed, could also be modeled computationally. The poem's structure acts as an algorithm, guiding the reader's attention to the most salient semantic elements. This work on metaphor and computation was decades ahead of its time. It prefigured modern research in computational creativity, cognitive linguistics, and computational models of metaphor. While cognitive linguists such as George Lakoff and Mark Johnson later popularized the theory that metaphor is central to thought, Masterman sought to operationalize and compute it. This goal remains highly relevant today as researchers strive to create more human-like artificial intelligence. Embodied AI researchers, for example, are now exploring how physical embodiment and sensorimotor experience contribute to the grounding of metaphoric language, attempting to bridge the gap between abstract symbolic representations and concrete perceptual experiences. Masterman's work drew inspiration from several key sources: the literary theory of I. Richards, particularly his concepts of tenor and vehicle in metaphor, provided a direct theoretical framework. Richards argued that a metaphor involves two parts: the tenor, which is the underlying subject or idea being conveyed, and the vehicle, which is the image or concept used to represent the tenor. Masterman adopted this framework, seeing the CLRU thesaurus as a means of mapping the relationships between tenors and vehicles. The poetry of Gerard Manley Hopkins served as her primary object of analysis. Hopkins' innovative use of language, His creation of neologisms and his dense metaphorical imagery provided a rich source of data for her theories. She saw in Hopkins' poetry a concrete example of the computational processes she sought to model. Furthermore, Ludwig Wittgenstein's philosophy of diverse language functions underpins her entire approach. Wittgenstein argued that language is not a monolithic entity, but a collection of language games, each with its own rules and conventions. Masterman applied this concept to the study of metaphor, seeing poetic language as a distinct language game with its own unique computational structure. Masterman's ideas provided a crucial philosophical justification for researchers in symbolic artificial intelligence who resisted the purely statistical trend. As statistical methods gained prominence in the field, some researchers questioned the value of symbolic approaches. Masterman's work offered a compelling argument for the continued importance of semantic representation and knowledge-based reasoning. Her work directly influenced figures such as Yorick Wilkes, another major proponent of semantic-first AI. Wilkes' preference semantics system for resolving ambiguity shares a clear intellectual lineage with Masterman's goals. Preference semantics, developed in the late 1960s and 1970s, aimed to understand natural language by encoding semantic information about words and their relationships. Wilkes' system used a set of semantic primitives to represent the meaning of words and sentences, and it employed a process of preference to resolve ambiguities. This approach, like Masterman's, emphasized the importance of semantic representation in natural language processing. The influence of Masterman's focus on semantic understanding can be clearly seen in Wilkes' approach to AI. Her work, however, also faced challenges. Critics questioned whether a thesaurus-based approach could truly capture the full richness and complexity of human metaphorical thought. They argued that metaphor is often context-dependent and relies on a deep understanding of cultural and social factors. A purely formal system, they claimed, could never fully replicate the human capacity for metaphorical interpretation. Despite these criticisms, Masterman's work remains a significant contribution to the field of computational linguistics. She was among the first to recognize the central importance of metaphor in human cognition, and she proposed a concrete computational model for this process. Her ideas have inspired generations of researchers in artificial intelligence, cognitive linguistics, and computational creativity. Her work continues to be relevant as researchers explore new ways to create more human-like AI. Masterman's influence on semantic understanding can be clearly seen in Wilkes' approach to AI. Her work, however, also faced challenges. Critics questioned whether a thesaurus-based approach could truly capture the full richness and complexity of human metaphorical thought. They argued that metaphor is often context-dependent and relies on a deep understanding of cultural and social factors. A purely formal system, they claimed, could never fully replicate the human capacity for metaphorical interpretation. Despite these criticisms, Masterman's work remains a significant contribution to the field of computational linguistics. She was among the first to recognize the central importance of metaphor in human cognition, and she proposed a concrete computational model for this process. Her ideas had inspired generations of researchers in artificial intelligence, cognitive linguistics, and computational creativity. Her work continues to be relevant as researchers explore new ways to create more human-like AI. The unifying thread running through Margaret Masterman's seemingly disparate intellectual pursuits, from the philosophy of physics to machine translation to Christian metaphysics, is a profound and consistent search for the underlying, concrete, repeatable artifacts of meaning-making. Her methodology involved applying a form of pattern analysis across diverse domains of human thought. The paradigm as artifact in science, the semantic primitive in language, and the archetypal image in faith are, in her view, analogous structures. This perspective offers a powerful lens through which to view her entire career. Masterman's critique of Thomas Kuhn's rather vague concept of a paradigm was, at its core, a demand for a tangible artifact. She sought a concrete, identifiable unit within scientific thought that could be analyzed and, crucially, replicated. This drive for tangible representation is precisely what she then attempted to build computationally at the Cambridge Language Research Unit with her thesaurus heads. These heads were intended to be the repeatable, functional units of meaning that could allow a machine to understand language. For example, the head for movement would include related terms like walk, run, jump, travel, each with its own defined relationships and weights. This was a deliberate attempt to ground the abstract concept of meaning in a concrete, computational structure. Later, in founding the Epiphanic Philosophers, a group dedicated to reconciling science and faith, she extended this pattern-based methodology to the realm of religious experience. She analyzed prayer and liturgy as language games, drawing heavily on the later work of Ludwig Wittgenstein, recognizing these practices as possessing their own repeatable, functional structures. Religious imagery in this framework became a kind of spiritual interlingua, a shared symbolic language that transcends specific doctrines. Consider, for instance, the recurring imagery of light in Christian prayer. Masterman would analyze this image not as a vague symbol of divinity, but as a concrete element within a specific language game of prayer, examining its function, its variations, and its relationship to other elements within that system. This approach mirrored her earlier work in computational linguistics, where she sought to identify the fundamental semantic primitives that underlie all linguistic expression. The influence of Wittgenstein's concept of forms of life on this stage of her work is undeniable. She applied this concept equally to the communities of scientists and the faithful, seeing both as engaging in distinct language games with their own unique rules and structures. Her own devout Anglican faith was a primary driver of this final stage of her intellectual journey. It provided her with the impetus to seek a deeper understanding of the relationship between science and religion, a relationship she saw as fundamentally harmonious rather than inherently conflictual. Her analysis of religious language was therefore driven by a desire to find the underlying patterns and structures that connect the scientific and the spiritual realms. The enduring legacy of Margaret Masterman lies not simply in her individual contributions to the philosophy of science, computational linguistics, or theology, but in her unique ability to see the underlying connections between these seemingly disparate fields. She was, in essence, the ultimate pattern finder. Her genius resided in her capacity to look at a scientific revolution, a French sentence, a Gerard Manley Hopkins sonnet, or a Christian prayer, and ask the identical, fundamental question: what is the concrete, repeatable unit of meaning here? This question drove her entire intellectual project, from her early work on paradigms to her later explorations of religious language. She was a philosopher of the artifact, not merely a philosopher of science or computer scientist. Her life's work culminates in a profound and enduring challenge to discover the essential, new forms of meaning that underpin all human symbolic systems, from the scientific to the spiritual. Consider, for example, the concept of emergence in complex systems theory. Masterman's work anticipates this concept by suggesting that complex meanings arise from the interaction of simpler, more fundamental units. In her view, a scientific theory, a literary work, or a religious ritual are all emergent phenomena arising from the combination and interaction of basic artifacts of meaning. Her focus on the concrete and repeatable also anticipated later developments in artificial intelligence, particularly in the field of neural networks. These networks learn by identifying patterns in data, and Masterman's work can be seen as a precursor to this approach. She was, in effect, attempting to build a neural network of the mind, a system that could learn and understand language by identifying the underlying patterns and relationships between words and concepts. Masterman's enduring contribution lies in her unwavering commitment to finding the fundamental building blocks of human understanding. She recognized that meaning is not something abstract and ethereal, but something concrete and tangible, something that can be analyzed, replicated, and ultimately understood. Her legacy is that of an intellectual pioneer who saw, long before others, that the deep structures of human knowledge might be fundamentally computational. She challenged us to move beyond abstract theorizing and focus on the concrete details of how meaning is created and communicated. Her work continues to inspire researchers in diverse fields, from artificial intelligence to cognitive science to religious studies, all seeking to uncover the essential artifacts of meaning that underpin our understanding of the world. Her vision was that the deep structures of human knowledge might be fundamentally computational, and her work continues to resonate with anyone seeking to understand the underlying patterns and structures that shape human thought.
We really appreciate you tuning into this AI-powered presentation. Our goal is to push the boundaries of AI in content creation, and your input is invaluable. If there's a particular subject you'd like to see us tackle next, or if you have suggestions on how we could fine-tune our AI's creative prompts, please don't hesitate to leave your ideas in the comments section. We're excited to bring you more unique content very soon.